Hello, I'm U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Happy International Education Week. The United States is growing more diverse and our global economy more interconnected. That's why we need to raise the bar and give all of our students the opportunities to gain the multilingual skills and cultural competencies that'll help them compete and shape bright futures. Each November, the United States Departments of Education and State come together to celebrate International Education Week. It's a time to promote the benefits of international education and highlight U.S. government programs that expand access to global experiences. Global engagement helps us strengthen education right here in the United States and champion student success. For that reason, the Department of Education's Raise the Bar initiative prioritizes creating pathways for global engagement, so every student can access strong on-ramps to college and careers and opportunities to become multilingual. In today's world, many of our society's challenges have a global reach, and more people are working in cross-cultural or transnational jobs. Mastering more than one language is a superpower that helps people excel, collaborate with clients and co-workers from other countries, and compete for the most in-demand jobs. It's also how we represent the beautiful diversity that is one of our country's greatest strengths. The United States will always be shaped by the identities and backgrounds of our people. By experiencing different cultural and linguistic traditions at home, students can apply that knowledge in international settings. Welcoming foreign students, teachers, and professionals to the U.S. on exchanges also brings different perspectives to American classrooms, deepening the discussions students have on international issues. These experiences do so much to enrich learning. This week, we're releasing our updated international strategy, Succeeding Globally Through International Education and Engagement. We're reaffirming our commitment to preparing all students in our country to thrive, not only today, but tomorrow. From strengthening our education cooperation with other countries to sharing best practices in education to supporting Title VI and Fulbright Hays Awards, the Department of Education will continue efforts that help students engage on a global scale. So happy International Education Week. Join the celebration now and throughout the year.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm always inspired to hear Secretary Cardona speak, and I loved his jacket as well. I'm Sarah Beaton. I'm the director of the Advanced Training and Research Team in the International Foreign Language Education. And I'm delighted that you are all here this morning. And it's with great pleasure and honor that we gather here today to celebrate International Education Week, a time when we come together to recognize the importance of global education and cultural exchange. I am delighted to welcome our guests who traveled from afar to participate on this panel and discuss their international education journeys through Title VI and Fulbright Hays programming. I want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues, Gabby Gillespie and Amy Marion, whose efforts resulted in this dynamic event. Please look on page 4 of your program for the descriptions of the EIFL programs that we will discuss on today's panel. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce Montserrat Garibay, Deputy Assistant Secretary and Director for the Office of English Language Acquisition. Director Garibay brings a wealth of experience and expertise to this crucial role, making significant contributions to the field of education throughout her career. With a deep commitment to fostering linguistic diversity and promoting cross-cultural education understanding, Director Garibay plays a pivotal role in shaping policies and initiatives that support English language learners on a national and international scale. In her capacity as Deputy Assistant Secretary and Director, she has demonstrated unwavering dedication to creating inclusive and equitable education opportunities for all. Her visionary leadership has not only impacted the lives of English language learners, but has also contributed to the broader goal of building a stronger America through her work with immigrant families. As we listen to our panelists this morning and Dean Varis from the University of Wisconsin and attend other International Education Week events, let us be inspired by Director Garabay's commitment to fostering an environment where language is a bridge, not a barrier. Her leadership serves as a beacon, guiding us toward a future where education knows no borders and every learner has the opportunity to thrive.
Buenos dias, good morning, bonjour. I'm so excited to be here this morning and, happy International Education Week. It's a pleasure to have you here at the Department of Education and to celebrate this very important week. Multilingualism, as Secretary Cardona shares, it's a superpower. And we see that every day as we travel throughout the different states in our country, and to see students really love their identity, but love their culture, and while they're learning English is truly an inspiration. So thank you to all the educators that are here today for doing the most important work, which is educating the future of our country, our most precious assets, our students. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Varis. She's the Provost and Dean of the International Division at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, she leads the campus efforts to promote international scholarship and engagement, cultivate global awareness, and prepare students for a diverse and interconnected world. As a UW-Madison alum, Dr. Varis has benefited from many of the programs supported by the International Division. She studied Swahili as a graduate student with the support of the Foreign Language and Area Studies Fellowship. She's also the recipient of both of the Fulbright Hays Doctoral Dissertation Fellowship and the Fulbright Scholarship Fellowship. And she led a study abroad program as a professor. In addition, Dr. Varis has helped to establish international partnerships with universities abroad and serve as the co-principal investigator for the U.S. Agency of International Development project, partnering with higher education institutions in Zambia. Dr. Varis' professional expertise and personal engagement in international education enable her to bring a very unique perspective to her role as the Senior International Officer of the University of Wisconsin. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you here at the Department of Education, and we're excited to hear this wonderful panel. Thank you.
Go Badgers! Go Badgers! Yes. That's the spirit I like. Thank you so much, Director Garabay, and to my hosts for this opportunity to be here with you today to participate in International Education Week by sharing my experiences with today's theme of advancing careers through multilingual education. In my remarks, I will focus on the impact that Title VI and the Fulbright Hays program have had on my career from the time I was a graduate student at the University of Illinois through the years that I was a professor and now as the Vice Provost and Dean of the International Division at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Along the way, I hope to demonstrate the many ways that multilingual education matters for individuals, for this nation, and for the world. The most pressing problems we face today are global in nature. Whether it is pandemic preparation, climate change, or forced migration, the solutions require collaboration among the best minds in the world. And whether one is an educator or an entrepreneur, a soldier or a scientist, we need Title VI and Fulbright Hays to ensure that future generations are interculturally competent and linguistically prepared. Only then can we overcome the grand challenges of today and tomorrow. But before I address the present and the future, let me take a step back into the past and tell you a little bit about the multilingual milieu in which I was raised. My father was an immigrant from Czechoslovakia, for whom English was his third language, after Slovak, the language of his home, and Italian, the language of the street where he grew up in Chicago in the 1920s. When he was drafted into the US Army in 1941, his aptitude for learning languages saved his life, or so he told my siblings and me many, many times. Rather than being drafted into an infantry division like most of his friends, he was sent to Bard College in New York to study German and was eventually stationed in Paris, where he translated messages from the Nazis during the day and studied French at night. After the war, he was sent to Berlin for 6 months, where he learned basic Russian from Soviet soldiers. Upon his return to the United States, my father taught German and French, and eventually started a graduate program in Slavic linguistics with the assistance of the GI Bill. When the Soviet satellite Sputnik was launched in 1957, and the National Defense Education Act was passed in response, my father was an early beneficiary of Title VI of this act, as he was sent to Moscow for advanced language instruction. In 1960, he launched his career as a professor of Russian at Purdue University, and later took students from Purdue, Indiana University, and the Ohio State University to the Soviet Union on a semester-long program. And despite the Cold War context, we had several visiting scholars from the Soviet Union in our home, and these exchanges helped to dispel myths about the Russians. In the 3 decades that followed my father's NDEA experience, he advanced the education of hundreds of students and demonstrated that international education is the basis upon which a better world can be built. Now, with a father like this and a mother who taught Spanish and English as a second language, how could I not have become enthralled with multilingual education? I studied German in high school and college, but my interest shifted from Western Europe to East Africa during my senior year at Purdue. It was there that I took my first African Studies course and was introduced to the educational philosophy of Julius Nyerere, the first president of Tanzania, who made Swahili the centerpiece of his campaign for independence from British rule. Nyerere's foundational philosophy and policy, education for self-reliance, prioritized adult education and primary schooling, with Swahili as the medium of instruction across the country. These educational efforts were coupled with campaigns to promote self-sufficiency through school-based farms and by changing the curriculum so that it was more relevant for a rural agrarian African context. I was riveted by Nyerere's vision, and perhaps that was because of my own roots in rural Indiana. And I eagerly followed the advice of the professor who taught this African Studies course and applied to master's programs where I could study Swahili and applied linguistics. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign fit the bill. I still remember receiving the letter from Illinois informing me that I had received a FLAS fellowship for Swahili. Had I already known the language, I would have said something like, "Kumbe, nimebarikiwa." But instead, I said to my parents, "My goodness, I'm surprised and very proud of this achievement." Not only was I surprised, but I was also thankful because I really didn't know how I was going to pay for this master's program. The FLAS funding, combined with a teaching assistantship teaching English as a second language, led me to choose the more demanding research track in the applied linguistics program because I could devote myself to my studies rather than finding a second job. As it turned out, I was the first student through this very rigorous 3-year program, which was designed to correspond to doctoral preparation, eventually making the completion of my PhD faster and far less daunting. Between my second and third years at Illinois, I was selected for the Fulbright Hays Group Project abroad in Tanzania, where I spent a summer engaged in intensive language study and cultural enrichment activities. At this time, in 1990, Tanzania was emerging from a serious economic crisis, and there were very few tourists as there are today. When our group arrived in Zanzibar, there were so few tourists that we were announced on the radio, and Zanzibaris took it upon themselves to stop us on the street and test us on our Swahili skills. It was an ideal environment in which to develop linguistic competence, and our excursions to cultural events helped us to understand the nuances of Swahili. Of the many excellent teachers we had during this group project abroad, the one who had the most long-lasting effect on my life was someone who ceased his formal education at the end of primary school. His name was Ali, and he was the groundskeeper at the language school where we studied. He spoke very slowly and clearly whenever he greeted me. So I asked whether he could be my tutor, as the GPA program covered this cost for those of us who wanted extra instruction. One of the program directors was a little bit dubious, but he eventually agreed. And with that, Ali and I began our lessons walking the back streets of Stone Town, as the main town in Zanzibar is known, and discussing in my emerging intermediate level Swahili my many queries about history, politics, economics, and especially the educational system, where fewer than 10% of the youth at this time matriculated to secondary school. By the end of the summer, I knew I wanted to return to Tanzania as a teacher and continue my Swahili studies so that I might one day become a professor who could educate others about a critically important but poorly understood part of the world. And 2 years later, with my master's degree in hand, I achieved this goal by teaching at a high school on Mount Kilimanjaro, where I have had an association for more than 30 years. After a year of teaching, I returned to the United States and to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I pursued my PhD in education and African studies. My experience in Tanzania raised many questions about girls' education and its long-term impact on young women's livelihoods, marital decisions, and childbearing. With the assistance of the Fulbright coordinator at Wisconsin at the time, I was able to turn these experiential observations into empirical questions, resulting in my being awarded a Fulbright Hays DDRA Fellowship. This award supported a year of field research in Kilimanjaro and allowed me to bring my 8-month-old son with me, who in turn learned Swahili alongside English on the slopes of the mountain. Without this Fulbright Hays Award, I simply could not have done immersive ethnographic research that formed the basis for my dissertation and for my first book. This in-depth research helped set me apart from others when applying for postdoctoral fellowships and faculty positions. I was fortunate to receive a Mellon postdoctoral fellowship in anthropological demography at the Harvard School of Public Health, and then I began my first academic position as an assistant professor at Columbia University's Teachers College. The community on Mount Kilimanjaro, where I taught and conducted my doctoral research, became the site for a 12-year longitudinal study of youth livelihoods that I launched as a postdoctoral fellow and continued as a professor. The importance of such research was recognized midway through when I received a Fulbright Scholar Award to return to Tanzania for another year to do an even deeper dive into the forces affecting young people's economic and educational opportunities. This time, with 2 primary school children in tow, I spent the next year looking at the lives of youth from the perspectives of a professor and a parent, a position that generated new questions and new lines of inquiry. Throughout these years of conducting research in Tanzania, I was also teaching and mentoring graduate students in the international education programs at Teachers College and then at the University of Minnesota, where I moved in 2008 and remained until July of this year. Many of my students benefited from Title VI, from Fulbright Hays, and from programs run by the Institute of International Education and the State Department, all of which supported the development of their multilingualism and international expertise. They used their knowledge of Arabic, Chinese, French, Hindi, Samoan, Serbian, Spanish, and Swahili to launch careers in the Foreign Service, in higher education, and in policymaking organizations in the United States and abroad. Today, they serve local, state, national, and international public and private institutions to improve literacy, public health, diplomatic relations, and environmental sustainability. These recipients of Title VI and Fulbright-Hays funding possess superpowers, as Secretary Cardona has aptly described multilingualism, and granting them, by virtue of this, greater ability to exert influence through their linguistic and cultural expertise in domestic and international arenas. In my current position as Vice Provost and Dean of the International Division at Wisconsin, I have yet another vantage point from which to view the Title VI and Fulbright-Hays programs and to advocate for multilingual education. The university takes great pride in our longstanding leadership in multilingual and cross-cultural education. One reason for this success is the close relationship among 4 units within our international division: the Study Abroad Office, the Institute for Regional and International Studies, which is home to our Area Study Centers, the Fulbright Office, and the Language Program Office, the coordinating unit for our rich array of less commonly taught languages. These units support and reinforce one another, which is one of the reasons why Wisconsin consistently ranks in the top 3 in the nation in the number of students who earn a bachelor's degree in a language other than English. Language study is facilitated through coursework on campus and abroad. The Open Doors data that was released this week shows that Wisconsin is 35% above the national average when it comes to the percentage of our students who are studying abroad for at least a semester. These programs are led by our faculty or faculty in consortia to which we belong. Our commitment to longer-term duration study abroad programs encourages students to develop strong multicultural skills, and we have numerous ways to link multilingualism and study abroad experiences to career paths, including a very active office we call Intern Abroad that offers more than 50 internships internationally each summer. The Institute for Regional and International Studies works hand in hand with these programs, offering majors, minors, and certificates. They put on a wide array of cultural programs each semester, enriched by international students and scholars on campus. Our 8 national resource centers, which include African Studies, East, South, and Southeast Asian Studies, European Studies, Russia and Central Asian Studies, and Latin American and Caribbean Studies, provide fellowships for language study. They have been deeply involved in Title VI and Fulbright-Hays from the beginning. Since 2000 alone, these centers have awarded more than 3,000 FLAS fellowships for languages from Arabic to Hindi to Turkish and Vietnamese, and over the course of their history have granted some 5,000 undergraduate and graduate degrees and certificates. The outreach across the state and campus by our area studies centers is one of the reasons why the University of Wisconsin ranks highly in the number of Fulbright Scholar, Fulbright U.S. Student, and Fulbright-Hays DDRA awards. For 2023, we tied for 3rd in the number of Fulbright Scholar Awards granted to our faculty, and the number of applications for student awards are up by more than 40% this year alone. In the past decade, 121 Fulbright U.S. Student Awards and 61 Fulbright-Hays DDRA Awards have been made to UW students. And we anticipate these numbers will increase now that the university has committed resources to a full-time Fulbright coordinator. Finally, our Wisconsin International Summer Language Institutes, or WISLI, offers more than 30 less commonly taught languages. And we are the only site in the United States for intensive study of some of these languages, such as Kazakh and Tajik. University of Wisconsin students who participate in WISLI are typically funded with FLAS fellowships, while students from other universities receive support from their home institution and through scholarships we offer through the International Division. Some Wisley students are part of Project Go, or Global Officer, a program for ROTC students to study critical languages. And in summer 2024, those who come to Madison will be studying Hindi, Indonesian, Russian, or Turkish. And I welcome all of you to the University of Wisconsin this summer for the Wisley program. One is never too late, and I'm an example, to study a new language. These activities are essential in producing new generations of strategic language experts who are essential to U.S. security, economic competitiveness, and educational excellence in an increasingly multilingual nation and interconnected world. Now, despite these accomplishments, there are some areas where we seek improvement through our campus efforts. These are challenges facing higher education institutions across the nation. And let me mention three that strike me as most pressing. First, if we are to diversify the workforce in fields that require a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree, we must attract and retain more students from underrepresented groups on our campuses. Only then are we likely to see a more diverse group of students receiving FLAS and Fulbright Hays awards. The most recent data, which came out this week for the University of Wisconsin, represents a mixed picture. On the one hand, our FLAS recipients generally reflect the demographic background of students on our campus, with a slight overrepresentation for students identifying as Asian or Latinx, who are concentrated in area studies programs where heritage language speakers might logically be based. On the other hand, in a state that is rapidly diversifying, we could do more to attract multilingual and multicultural students to our campus in the first place. FLAS, Fulbright Hays, and some of our new study abroad initiatives can help to do so. Today, more than 30% of students in Wisconsin's public schools are students of color, compared to only 20% 2 decades ago. Many of these students are already multilingual, and we could do more to attract seniors who have achieved the seal of biliteracy, a recognition that they have reached an advanced level in 2 languages or more. We could also do a better job of recruiting students who participate in the state's Global Scholars Program, which is designed to promote language study, cultural literacy development, and engagement in global issues. We do have important initiatives in place already, and they are making a difference. For example, our study abroad program partners with our admissions and diversity offices to offer a program we call the Global Gateway Initiative for first and second year students with financial need. This provides a full scholarship, including airfare, to participate in a faculty-led study abroad program each summer. And some of the destinations include Botswana and Singapore. These students typically return very enthusiastic about language learning and always with much stronger intercultural skills. Second, we need to do a better job of creating multiple pathways to multilingualism, depending on the career paths that students seek to pursue. The vast majority of FLAS fellows at Wisconsin are in a handful of majors: area studies, history, anthropology, and political science. Students in these majors can seamlessly integrate language study into their coursework, and they are strongly encouraged to do so. But what about students in business, computer science, engineering, and physics? Our study abroad office has developed a program we call Global Launch for freshmen during the summer before they start to take classes in Madison, or in the case of the Global Launch program in London, they spend the entire freshman year. I recently met with students who participated in the Global Launch program in Japan this past summer, and the diverse young people in this group were overwhelmingly positive about the experience. They told me how being in Japan helped them to become more resilient, confident, and globally aware. and how they now plan to study a second or third language during their bachelor's programs in fields from data science to neuroscience. In my role as dean, I hope to work with departments whose students have not had as many opportunities for language study and study abroad to develop options in accordance with their curriculum. Ideally, departments and the university would recognize the international expertise upon graduation as a way to signal to future employers that these young scientists and entrepreneurs are ready for today's global economy. And a third challenge extends beyond the borders of campus, and it is the necessity of justifying the importance of Title VI and Fulbright-Hays 65 years after the passage of the NDEA. There are university administrators who question the institutional support they provide to area studies, when these dollars could be spent on new buildings and faculty hires in other areas. There are members of the public who wonder why anyone would need to study a foreign language when translation is at our fingertips, thanks to generative AI like ChatGPT. And there are elected officials who believe that area studies centers no longer serve the goal of national defense, and that Fulbright-Hays is a program that has outlived its original purpose. It is beyond the scope of my remarks to address these concerns fully, but they do provide a way for me to return to my opening argument. Title VI and Fulbright-Hays are as critical today as they were 6 decades ago, if not even more so. In 1960, there was one principal political threat to the United States, the Soviet Union, and no nation came close to our economic might. Today, we need experts not only in Russian, but also in Arabic, Mandarin, and dozens of less commonly taught languages to expand diplomacy and build political coalitions around the globe. Title VI is the foundation for national security, as it supports students during the years it takes to develop language proficiency and cultural competence, eventually producing experts for careers in foreign service, industry, the military, and education. We are also in a very different moment today as our nation's economic engine is fueled by international trade, and it is reliant on linguistically and culturally diverse teams. The COVID-19 pandemic introduced the phrase global supply chains to Americans who had never given much previous thought to intertwined manufacturing and markets around the world. While Google Translate can undoubtedly assist with rudimentary conversational exchanges, we need people who understand the subtleties of a second language and can employ their intercultural competence when negotiating contracts and trade agreements. Finally, the pandemic made clear that global stability and cooperation depend on a wide range of issues, all of which demand professionals with language and area studies expertise. Public health, environmental protection, and immigration may continue to animate national politics, but they are global in scale, and we need multilingual experts from this country engaging with multilingual specialists in others. Addressing the grand challenges of our day also requires innovative solutions based upon knowledge gained through in-depth international research. And this is one reason why we must preserve Fulbright-Hays. As I conclude my remarks, I think about my father and the impact of Title VI on his career and the careers of the countless students he taught during his 3 decades as a professor. I consider my own career and how it has been indelibly marked by the Title VI Fulbright-Hays partnership. In the years ahead, we must act to ensure these programs expand, reach even more diverse students, and support an even wider array of fields of study. Given the urgent challenges posed by ongoing conflict, the climate crisis, political polarization, and the spread of authoritarianism, it is no exaggeration to say that our future prosperity depends on these essential programs. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I would now like to invite our panelists to join me on the stage. Correct nameplate in front of them. Good.
Panelists.
How's this work? Yes, we'll just hold them. Is this working? Yeah, yes, it is. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. And it was a joy to read their bios and to learn how the Fulbright Hays programs and the Title VI programs have influenced each of their lives. So I thought we might begin by way of an introduction by each of you. And I also thought, as you're giving us a little bit of background, you might share something about your past. I told you a little bit about the multilingual environment in which I grew up, and I wondered whether you had such an experience growing up in a multilingual environment, or perhaps even in a monolingual environment that inspired you to go ahead with language study. So Ryan, do you want to begin at that end?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you to everyone at the Department of Education for organizing this. Thank you to Dean Vavris as well. Very grateful for the invitation. I'm Ryan Zohar. I work as the Middle East Studies Librarian at Georgetown University, where I like to say that I'm in charge of building our Middle East collections, supporting research in Arab and Middle East studies, and connecting users with the library. So I hope throughout this conversation I'll be able to illustrate the role that foreign languages play in my work, and that the influence that the FLAS and Fulbright Hays programs had on my trajectory in general. As far as my background goes, I did grow up in a multilingual home. My father's a native Hebrew speaker, and it actually was my my family background that first drew me to foreign languages, literatures. I always sort of had this interest. And you know, my family's roots are originally in the Jewish communities of Iraq and Lebanon. So I always knew that there was sort of an Arabic language presence in my family that had at one point been lost. So part of my motivation and my interest in studying Arabic had been sort of to re-engage with that part of my family's history, and that culture more generally.
Good morning, everybody. Oglonimin. My name is Teresa Nichols. I'm currently an academic exchange specialist at the U.S. Department of State, and previously I worked at Indiana University for a number of years in various international education and research and grant writing roles. For my background, you know, I grew up in a monolingual household, but my father was a military brat. So he grew up spending formative parts of his life in Germany, and my grandparents loved to travel. That was part of my grandfather's military career. So from an early age, having those travel experiences and the importance of trying to even just pick up a little bit of the language and the locations you went to build those people-to-people ties was always something that really inspired me and encouraged me to pursue that later when I got to do my own academic studies. So happy to be here with you all today.
Good morning. My name's Heather Maxwell. I am a presenter for TV and radio on the Voice of America. I'm an ethnomusicologist and I focus on African music. So my radio show is all about African music, broadcast in English to Africa, over 17 million listeners a week. I also have a TV show as well. I just got back from Nairobi and Dar es Salaam last night. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. But you know, I grew up in Michigan and we did not speak any language but English. However, I was an opera student and we had to sing in foreign languages. And I liked the feeling of singing in foreign languages. It just felt good and it was fun. And then once I went to college, I got curious about world music, and then I understood, oh, I really need to speak and understand a foreign language, and that set me on my path to where I am today.
Thank you, and thank you so much for being here after such a long trip.
I would not miss it. I wouldn't.
Uh,
Almost did, actually. That's
hello, can you all hear me? On respect tout le monde, my name is Naya Toussaint. I grew up in New Jersey. I am the descendants of folks from Low Country, North Carolina, and from Low Country, Haiti. I say that to say that, so I grew up right outside of Princeton, New Jersey, so a very academic area. I do believe I grew up in a multilingual space, but there was also English dominance. So though my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, spoke Creole, you know, my mother did not, as one of the only ones of her siblings born here. And I grew up around Creole. I also say I grew up around Southern Black American English. And then I grew up with this very, and I describe it as standard English dominance because I was also a person who, though grew up with lots of educators, needed reading help and all of these things when I went to school. And now looking back, I realized, well, I was like hearing 3 different languages. So yes, multilingualism in this context of there was one that was dominant. Yeah.
Hey, good morning. My name is Adrian Erlinger. Currently, I serve as ID8 program lead at Portfolio T. We build startup companies that really focus on big global issues like food security, water security, biodiversity. We have a lot of global presence working around the world with our teams, particularly in Silicon Valley, in the Middle East, in Europe, all over the place. For me, I studied Russian in high school. I was very fortunate to have that experience, and went to Russia in 1997 as a high school student during a very wild time in that country's history. And I was very, very fortunate to have scholarships available for the study of foreign languages, including Russian and subsequently Ukrainian. And so Title VI has been instrumental in my career path, starting from journalism, media relations, working on research analysis, as well as international education. So it's been an incredible path, and I'm very much grateful for Title VI for all of those opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I mentioned during my presentation that I had a professor my senior year in college who set me on this path to Swahili study, East African studies, and so forth. And I do wonder how my career would have progressed had I not taken that one class and met this really brilliant professor. I would like to know from each of you whether there was a pivotal experience or person that helped shape the trajectory that you have been on. I know that, Adrian, you said that you took Russian in high school, but why didn't you take French or German, perhaps? But I'd like to hear that from each of you. And in answering this question, perhaps you could tell the audience, what part of the world have you specialized in?
Starting in on this side. So in terms of the person who's probably had the most impact or the most pivotal role in terms of putting me on this path towards language education and then, you know, eventually a multilingual career, it actually wasn't an Arabic language teacher, but in high school I had a Spanish language teacher, Senor Burgos, who really instilled a love of languages in me. I really fell in love with Latin American literature through his courses. And I should say, my undergraduate career started in, I did a dual degree program between Columbia University and Sciences Po, which is a university in France. So I actually spent my first 2 years of undergrad in France, and then my third and fourth years at Columbia Universities. And I studied on the campus in Menton, which was specialized. It was in the south of France, and it specialized the Middle East and Mediterranean was the area of focus. So eventually, towards the end of high school, I knew I was going to be going to France, and I had self-studied a little bit of French, but Senor Burgos also spoke French, and so I would stay after school with him every day and take additional French sort of lessons with him during his office hours. So that was my first sort of jump from one language that I had studied, which was Spanish, to another, which was French. And then when I arrived in Menton, I eventually started speaking Arabic. And with the regional focus in Menton, I was able to continue taking classes in French and then begin sort of academically taking intensive classes in Arabic as well. So it was a bit of a jumble, but I really enjoyed the experience of taking them one after another, or in some cases at the same time, because you also get that sort of comparative angle, and it really can help to learn languages in some ways. I know some people will say that you'll end up speaking mixes of all of them, and sometimes that's true, but you'll also learn a lot more about these languages along the way.
So like you, I switched from my high school language to other things in the future. I studied French in high school, and while I really enjoyed that experience, I was always very interested in Asia. And so when I went to my undergraduate, I wanted to study Chinese, and I had some great experiences. And one of the things that let me be able to do was I did a fieldwork experience where they took us to Russia, to China, and to Mongolia. And the biggest part was in Mongolia. And so this was a country that I really didn't know a lot about. I took a class the semester beforehand where they introduced us to a little bit of the language, a little bit of the context and the culture. But at the time I was studying Mandarin Chinese, and I thought I was going to do archaeology in China. I was an anthropologist. I was just really interested in that part of the world. And then when I had the opportunity to go in person and to talk to people about different issues, especially related to cultural heritage, I had a wonderful time in China. But when I went to Mongolia, I met so many people that even though at that stage my Mongolian was still very basic, they were so passionate and so excited. They wanted to talk. They wanted to share their experiences. They wanted to share the things that they thought could be improved. And so at that point, I had the sense of like Dean Vavris, that I wanted to explore this issue deeper. And so, I knew then that I wanted to go to graduate school, and I wanted to be able to really make language a centerpiece of what I was doing, so I could actually have those conversations that I had a glimpse of as an undergraduate. It led me to choose Indiana University, which is one of many U.S. universities that have really excellent language programs. And the only reason that was possible for me was because of the FLAS funding that I received originally for Chinese, and then also for Mongolian. So when I think of kind of pivotal experiences, it was that first time really getting to go overseas to have those experiences of a couple of different countries, and then just the very many, very warm, very welcoming Mongolian people I met, some of whom have become, lifelong friends.
So I remember, can you hear me? Okay. I remember at University of Michigan, where I went to undergrad, I had one professor named Dr. Owusu, and his first name was Maxwell, which is my last name, so I liked that. And he was just such a snappy character, and he was from Ghana, and I became really infatuated with just the way he thought and the way he delivered lectures. And I thought, and then I was also studying world music, and I liked African music, so I wanted to go somewhere, because I thought, well, if I'm going to spend more years, studying African music, I should first go to a place in Africa and see if I actually like it, really. And so I talked with him about it after hours sometime and said, I want to come to Africa. He said, well, go to Ghana. And I said, okay. And then he said there had been an exchange program, official exchange program between University of Ghana and University of Michigan, but because of some strife, they had canceled it. But he said, you just go anyway, and you can study there. And so I did that, and I loved it. And I spent a semester there just independently writing papers for various professors at Michigan. And when I finished and graduated the year later, I wanted, the experience in Ghana made me realize I had to learn another language because I wanted to know how music was a part of life, how it was talked about, the context. And I went to villages and stuff, and nobody was speaking English, and I missed everything. So I knew, okay, I have to speak a language. And so when I graduated, I joined the Peace Corps, primarily because I knew I could go to Africa and I could learn, I would have time to learn a language. And that set me off to study French at University of Michigan, because I thought, well, if it's not an Anglophone country I'll go to, it will be a Francophone country. And then they sent me to Mali. And that's where I learned Bambara, and my French got really good there. So that was it. It was Dr. Owusu.
I hope he's listening.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I'm struggling to answer this question for some reason. But I think why and what's coming up for me is realizing as I look back, which I haven't done until, thinking about this panel, is that there was this sense of, even though I felt I never mastered all of those languages that I mentioned, I had to know them. And so, there wasn't a moment. I remember 6th grade, it was time to pick a language, right? And of course I chose French, but like that was the first time it felt like I had a choice in language learning. As a child, even second generation of immigrants or migrant people, right, within our country. And so I think it's interesting, and the only the people that come up are my family in this question, and having to know when it was time to speak whatever language, right? So when we were driving from New Jersey to Alligator, North Carolina, down to our land, I heard my grandparents switch their vernacular, their language, and I heard my grandmother on my other side switch every day, between English and French and Creole, right? And then when I went to school, I had to know, Naya speaks with an accent, I was like, what, and so I think that the people are those folks in my family who made this decision to create multilingual spaces, because they could have decided not to, right? And then I think it would have been more of a, who was that teacher, or that I would have intersected with later down the road. Now, there were teachers, but many of them too were like, yes, we're on the same, kind of rhythm as my family. Like, you don't know Creole? What are you doing? We gotta get it together, And even Dr. Marcy Washington at FIU, who was from rural South Carolina, right? And her teaching was, what did your family say, right? Always it was, did you call your mom? Oh, before you write this paper, did you call your mom? Did you call your grandma? Even before I went to grad school, she's like, did you call your mom? And I made that decision of what school I would go to, with context, with family, in the context of family. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, my journey with Ukrainian language started with the University of Kansas having the foresight to really dedicate a small amount of resources to the study of that language in the late 90s, early 2000s. A handful of people were in that program. There was one professor, Dr. Alexander Tsov, may he rest in peace, but he was the forefront of that program, he and his wife, who taught Ukrainian language. And it was really teaching the next generation of foreign area officers in the military, Ukrainian. It just, looking back, there was, I think, tremendous foresight as to the study of Ukrainian as a separate language, politics, history, economics, culture, everything, to where we are today, that there still is a need for more Ukrainian specialists, more Russian area specialists, at a time when maybe the region was being eclipsed by maybe other more important areas like the Middle East or China. So I think it's amazing how the program, Title VI, really had that foresight to continue to fund these less commonly taught languages and still to this day really resonate. But for me, being an area studies person, I've spent my whole career working in Russia, East Europe, but then throughout my career, I've had other opportunities to work outside of the region, which have been more eye-opening and been able to kind of broaden out and work in Latin America and Middle East. So all of it starts with the key, which is language learning, and it really is that key to open up many doors.
Thank you so much for this background on your stories that have helped to bring you to this point. I would like now for us to focus a little bit more on the FLAS and Fulbright Hays programs. I'm curious, of the people in the audience, how many of you have had FLAS fellowships? A few. Okay, good. And Fulbright Hays? Aha, okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about those. For those of you who have had FLAS funding, in what way was that a different experience than simply taking a language that was on offer at the university where you were studying? In a sense, my question is, what difference does it make for students at the undergraduate or graduate level to be at an institution where FLAS funding is available? And I open that up to anyone who would like to speak to that.
I can go first again. I would say, FLAS and the opportunities that FLAS gave me were huge, especially, for those of you that know Arabic, you might know that at most universities, modern standard Arabic is what's taught, and that's sort of the language of the media, literature, diplomacy. But beyond that, each country has its own dialect that they speak sort of in everyday life, and sometimes in local media, and increasingly in literature now today too. I had been in France for 2 years. I had been studying modern standard Arabic, but I had not had this sort of on-the-ground experience anywhere in the region where I could practice both speaking modern standard Arabic, but also engaging with the dialect of one of these places. So I decided after my second year in France, which was ahead of arriving at Columbia, to apply for a FLAS fellowship from Columbia University's Middle East Institute, which is the Title VI center there that provided FLAS funding for Arabic. And I was lucky enough to be awarded it as an undergraduate. So I was awarded it for 2 summers. The first summer I spent in the Sultanate of Oman. And the second summer was in Egypt. Both countries have very different dialects, and I continued sort of learning modern standard Arabic in these intensive programs there. But then I was also given this exposure to a way of speaking Arabic that I hadn't really heard that much before, at least outside of recordings that we could hear in class. And it wasn't really taught at universities in that way. When I arrived at in Columbia later, I was able to take a dialect class at the university itself, so that was great. But prior to that, I had no experience with dialect. And those experiences sort of in Oman and Egypt were also great ways for me to learn sort of histories of these places and how sort of culture permeated the language as well through different expressions, symbols that were really important to people, and really get a sense of like the flow of how people spoke as well. And then, as I said, so returning to New York, I was lucky enough to be awarded an academic year of FLAS to continue studying Arabic in the classroom at Columbia on campus. So that was a wonderful way to sort of consolidate the skills that I had gotten on site in both the Sultanate of Oman and in Egypt. And then, following graduation, I participated. I was a fellow at the Center for Arabic Study Abroad in Amman, Jordan. The Center for Arabic Study Abroad was founded, I think, in 1967 as sort of one of the more advanced trainings that American students could receive in Arabic. It's a Fulbright Hays GPA funded program. Which I don't think I knew at the time of doing it, but I knew it was this sort of wonderful program, and that if people wanted to become sort of as advanced as possible in Arabic, this was sort of the step that you could take. So, yeah, that's I guess a little glimpse of how those programs influenced my trajectory. Yeah.
So I had 3 different FLAS fellowships. My first one was from Indiana University's Center for the Study of Global Change, focused on Mandarin Chinese. And so, obviously the Chinese classes were great, but it also, we had a cohort then of other FLAS fellows, many of whom were also graduate students or they were undergraduate students with kind of a research focus, people who were thinking about applied ways that they could use their language. And so we would have meetings, we would talk about some of our goals, and it was also just kind of a structure to help us understand what options did we have to really further our area studies, to further our language studies, what were other things up the pipeline that we could start preparing ourselves for. I did my first formal year of Mongolian in a compressed summer schedule through a summer language class, kind of similar to the structure that Wisconsin has and many other great universities. And so that was the first time I got to work with Sarunchunbaksh. I got to study also because it was a summer class with students from other universities or people with different professional goals. So that just really enriched the language experience. And I also, as part of that, I got to work with a second Mongolian educator, a foreign language teaching assistant. And then I was able to, because I had done a year and a couple of months, I could go straight into second year Mongolian. And that just really accelerated my learning experience, the coursework that I did alongside of that to really better understand kind of the region, the issues that I wanted to study. FLAS made all of that possible. And then, like I said, it was kind of a pipeline for other opportunities. So while I did my FLAS fellowship, my language study in the United States, that kind of set me up then for that next summer to go to the American Center for Mongolian Studies, which is one of the Council of American Overseas Research Centers based in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. They're also, a fantastic network of organizations. So I did intensive language study there for a summer. And through all of that, kind of back-to-back intensive language study, through talking to people who are passionate about area studies, who wanted to make sure that I got as strong as I could in the language, especially for the topics that I wanted to be able to talk to people about. Obviously you pick up other culture. Mongolian loves singing, so I learned a lot of Mongolian karaoke songs, which were actually really useful when I lived there. But, kind of having that wraparound experience made my fieldwork possible. And like I said, it kind of formed those lifelong relationships. I continued to work as then a professional with some of my colleagues where I had been their language student. And so I would go to heat up my lunch and I would get kind of, oh, how was your week? What's going on with your job? So basically a little bit of a language quiz, but also just continuing to build that relationship. And so, having kind of those deep relationships with FLAS, yes, it was so valuable for my language study, but it also impacted multiple other parts of my professional and then my personal life, kind of building that cohort relationship and building those relationships through language study.
So I had 2 FLAS. Well, I didn't. I had one, which was studying Hausa in graduate school because I thought I was going to do my master's degree in northern Nigeria. And that was great. First of all, it helps for paying for college, and I needed that, so that was really great. But it also opened up my my eyes to a different part of Africa that I didn't know about, and it was fun learning because linguistics is fun. But I didn't go there. I ended up going to Mali, as I said, and did another language. But then when I returned from Mali, because I had learned Bambara, I actually taught through the FLAS program, I taught Bambara to the earlier students coming in, just levels 1 and 2. And so the FLAS program in general at Indiana University was really great for me. I was always doing something related to that, and the African Studies program there was really strong in a lot of African languages. So yeah, it was really great.
So yes, why I study, just didn't take a language, I think is interesting because I was taking languages. I was taking Haitian Creole before becoming a FLAS fellow at Florida International University. And I was an academic year FLAS. And for sure money. It's really wonderful, actually. It was full tuition and everything with FLAS. At a public institution, but I think that it was really helpful to have that relationship with a professor, and to really have that dedicated time. So as I said, you know, there wasn't someone who necessarily like pivoted me into language. But once I got there, there was Professor Nicholas Andre at Florida International University, who is probably one of the closest relationships I have today. And it there was just a different level of seriousness in language learning because of FLAS, and not because, oh, I'm accountable to this scholarship. It was, this is a fellowship, and this is important that you are committing to the language in this way. And it was like, whoa, I'm reading a novel in Haitian Creole. What is going on? You know, and everyone's like, and you better finish it. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know, and then, you know, to my second semester, we actually had an independent study, and that's where the Haitian Creole Duolingo course was created in that independent study. But our textbook was a dictionary, right? Like, because the two of us were shaping this class. And so I literally was reading the Haitian Creole dictionary, right? And so I think FLAS really, whether, I don't know if I perceived this as what it would be beforehand, but it really was this in-depth study of the language that I do not think I could have got from just enrolling in the course and missing out on that unique relationship and reading, you know, thousands of pages in a dictionary to create a course that we could use as a gift to the world.
Could you say a little bit more about the creation of the Duolingo course? It's such an interesting opportunity that you had, and such an important contribution to the world, as you put it. So anything further that you would like to tell us about that experience for you?
Sure. So this, what's really interesting, and I guess FLAS offered this opportunity for us, for Professor Andre and I, was to shape how I was going to learn Creole. And, you know, especially at the advanced level, I think it just kind of worked out that we didn't have a course, you know, that was advanced enough for me at this point. That's how far along I had gotten by that point. And so we did an independent study, and I really, though I grew up in a Creole speaking household, I will say, like, I felt I didn't know Creole. And when I got to FIU, I was like, and took Creole 101, I was like, oh, I really don't know Creole, you know? And that's experience across the board for folks who feel they're fluent in Creole. When they get in the class at FIU, they're like, oh, I have a lot to learn. And I wanted to ensure that folks like me, Haitian Americans, had a free and easily accessible way to learn Creole. And I was taking Spanish on Duolingo, preparing for a study abroad trip, and loved it. And so we reached out to Duolingo. Well, I reached out to FIU. I said, this is what I think I want to do at the FLAS Fellowship. And they were like, okay, we don't know how we're going to do this, you know. And it literally ended up happening because of a LinkedIn message to the right person at Duolingo, you know, and also us. At the time, Duolingo allowed you to suggest a course. And so we had many of our students at FIU suggesting that Creole be added. And this was in 2017. The course launched in 2022. It was a huge undertaking. It still is a huge undertaking that, like, we'll have a new course drop maybe today. Any day now. It really was, right, in response to my experience and other Haitian American experiences of not knowing the formal linguistic agreements of the Haitian Creole Academy in Port-au-Prince, which is a group of linguists that in 1980 established the linguistical codes for the nation as a part of the Constitution that was reformed in that year. And so really what we're doing is spreading this knowledge that's stuck in a tower, you know, in Port-au-Prince. And so that was the intent. And then also we are trying to, through this course, as it's available on everyone's phone, correct information that was being put online for free. And in 2017, as recent as 2017, a lot of that was being done by U.S. missionaries. And I'm a religious scholar, so this was concerning for me because the language was being taught with evangelical goals, or also folks who, whether they're humanitarian or missionary, that were coming to Haiti, and they weren't learning the language necessarily in an academic setting. They were learning it while working, which speaks to the way that Creole it was taught for a long time, right, as a mother tongue. But for folks who are coming with, they're not children, right? They're coming with their background languages. So what this created was an issue of a lot of English being applied to the language. And so the course really works to also undo what folks have done in these ways, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Adrian, anything you would like to add to this conversation about the importance of FLAS funding?
Just echo that the funding is a game changer to really just focus on that study and really hit the ground running. But yeah.
Good. And I also wanted to ask you about your experience as a Fulbright scholar. As I understand it, you were a Fulbright scholar in Poland. And I think you're the only one on the panel that had that particular, you were a Fulbright scholar also. So I would love to hear from both of you about that program as well. How did that make a difference in your careers?
I was a Fulbright scholar in Mali, and in 2011, and in 2012 there was a coup, so I had to leave a little early. But that experience was terrific because I was able to teach music at the only higher institution of learning in the arts that the country has or had at that time. I don't even know if it's still there since the coup. But that was terrific because I was able to also teach American music and styles of singing that Malians were not very familiar with. I mean, there's such great musicians already. I really felt like I couldn't teach them about their own music. That just seemed silly. But it was really fun to teach blues concepts of chord changes and things like that, that they kind of, sometimes they even have a style that they call desert blues, but it's not based on understanding the way that the music works. So that was really fun. And the way that had to do with the career I have now, I actually left Mali during the coup and came straight to Washington and started the job I'm in right now. They had offered me this job or said, look, we think we want you to work for us. But I was just about to go to Mali, and I said, well, I want to do this Fulbright scholar thing first. And they're like, all right, well, we'll wait, because it takes a year for government jobs to happen oftentimes. So that's what happened. And yeah, I came straight here from that. So I don't know if it was a direct correlation from the scholar position.
And what about your Fulbright DDRA and
Yeah.
the Fulbright Scholar experience?
Well, the DDRA was for my dissertation, and that was, of course, beforehand. And I wasn't studying the language for the DDRA. I was studying my dissertation, which was on Malian song, and by studying the deep lyrics of a certain genre of music called wassoulou, which emerged right during the time that Mali became a democratic nation. And I was looking at the role that music and those lyrics had in representing the people, especially women at that time. So it was fundamental being able to know Bambara, and I learned so much more by really, going through song texts, hundreds of songs, and really understanding, writing it, singing it. It was just a really powerful experience to have. And it really helped shape everything that I do now, because I know that song, if you can even sing a few songs, and you mentioned it too, it really, really just opens up the hearts of people you're with. And that goes a long way. You know, AI is one thing, but it can't really replace that kind of interaction, you know, sort of, well, now in my job, more like it's almost soft diplomacy at its best, because it just touches the hearts of people you're with. They appreciate that you, the American who's got everything, many times that's how people feel, has taken the time to learn their language, the song, the melody. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, that sums it up.
Thank you. And Adrian?
Yeah, my Fulbright work in Poland was at the Center for Eastern Studies at the University of Warsaw, really kind of looking at energy security policy between newly entered EU countries, Poland included, and then the Eastern countries, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia. No, I really wanted to take that full year to be in a country. My previous experience was kind of going to and from Russia, Ukraine, but having that full year in Poland and learning a third Slavic language, realized that was probably one Slavic language too many. Yes, absolutely. But no, just provided, I guess, personally more direction to kind of focus on the political economics, and helped continue my career working in research analysis and business analysis and business diplomacy.
Thank you. Another important part of Title VI is the support for national resource centers. And several of you are or have worked in NRCs. I'd like to hear from you about, again, the contributions of these NRCs to campus life, to outreach across the states where you have worked, and so forth. Again, I'm not going to assume that everyone in the audience is familiar with the National Resource Centers and Area Study Centers. But for those of you who have worked in those centers or are working in those centers, what could you tell us about their significance?
Okay. Interesting. So we just had our site visit yesterday. Hello, Tim and Ryan. It's good to see you again. I currently work at New York University, which is a FLAS and NRC center, NRC. I also was very active and continue to hold relationships with the Kimberly Green Latin America and Caribbean Center at FIU, Florida International University. Go Panthers. I know I have some Panthers here. I will say these two centers are truly engaged in the work that they do. My area is Latin America and the Caribbean, everywhere that I go, it's like they go before me. Their names are, oh yeah, the scholarship that they're producing is truly important. But then also, I think what's fascinating about both of these NRCs is that they're engaged with the community, right? Their doors are open, and the ways that they're allowing folks on campus is fascinating. So NYU is holding 40 events per semester. Weekly we have a standing reservation on Monday nights that something's going to be happening regarding Latin America and the Caribbean. And then FIU, because of FLAS, I've been very involved with the Haitian Studies Association. I sit on the Emerging Scholars Committee for that scholarly association. And it was fascinating because at our conference this year, it was like, FIU was like, we are here. We are ready to support, whatever direction this scholarly association wants to move in. And also it was like, and how are you as our alum, and so I think that to have the support of the Department of Ed in just what seems really like genuine desires of these centers' hearts, right? It just goes a long way. I can see from as a student and now as someone who's working within a center, just like how this support and Once again, it's not necessarily like, oh, we have this money, so we have to do this. It always just feels like, the support of the Department of Ed really goes a long way in extending what centers want to do, and also really allows us to make these arguments around why area studies is still needed. And it is, as you said, it is a discussion that has to be had. And, and when even our centers did fulfill those previous defense goals of the nation, and we look at our old logos, we're like, this is a military logo, but now there's different ways that we can fulfill, the visions of our nation, and also that cross-cultural exchange and diplomacy that's happening. And so it's a beautiful thing that's happening.
Great. I do want to circle back to that question at the end before we open questions to the audience. So thank you for prompting that. Teresa and Ryan, did you want to address this?
Yeah, I had the benefit of getting to work at the Interasian and Uralic National Resource Center when I was a graduate student. And then when I was a full-time professional, I got to work at the Center for the Study of Global Change, which is an internationally focused center. And I was their associate director when I left. I think, like Naya also talked about, they're very important community resources. Obviously, students and faculty, there's so many different projects and initiatives that go on, but also with K-12 students, K-12 teachers, local businesses, people in the community who are interested in various topics. We did things working with healthcare professionals who are looking to kind of expand their expertise with different language diverse communities. And I remember one of the first experiences I had when I was a graduate student. So this was back 2013, before video conferencing was much of a thing. We had this very intensive setup, and I did a presentation for a rural library in Alaska that was really interested in climate change topics. And so I talked to them about the RLC, just what everybody loves to think about, the drying up of the RLC. And they asked such fantastic questions, and they were so engaged. And it was maybe 7 people from this rural Alaskan community, but that's part of what the Department of Education does through these national resource centers. We really want to bring our expertise. We want to have these conversations with people all over the country to help them think about global issues, how it impacts their lives, but also how they can maybe have a helpful lens on how do we think about some of these global challenges. So the National Resource Centers are definitely a fantastic resource. Universities put a lot of time, resources, people power into the programming and the offerings that they have. So even if you don't live close to a university that has a National Resource Center, I'm sure there's still some type of programming that you could be engaging with, and they would love to have you participate.
I'll just add to Teresa and Naya's words and re-hype the great programming that the NRCs do and the outreach that they do. That in my position now, I've been able to see or engage with the NRC in sort of a different way. So as part of the Title VI funds that are awarded to the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies, which is the NRC that I work with at Georgetown University, that funding includes funds for library acquisitions as well. So through those, we're able to collect materials from really all across the Arab world, and as well as materials in Persian, Hebrew, and Turkish, both physical materials and digital materials. And as a result, not only do students and scholars at Georgetown University benefit from this, but really students and researchers all across the United States do as well through resource sharing agreements, whether through consortium loans or through interlibrary loan as well. So that's sort of my new piece that I'm dealing with now.
That's wonderful to hear about. At the University of Wisconsin on this past Friday, the chancellor of the university visited the international division. We had her ear for 4 hours, and it took us weeks, maybe I would say even months, to plan this visit because there was so much going on in the division, but what would we highlight? And so we decided that we would start her visit at the Institute for Regional and International Studies, where our NRCs are based. And it was just so gratifying to see her expressions and to know that she was learning for the first time some of the outreach that our centers are doing across the state of Wisconsin. We started in the African Studies Program office, and they pulled out a very simple box they called a discovery box, and they explained how these boxes are sent to teachers all across the state of Wisconsin. So they showed us the one with the Chinua Achebe book, Things Fall Apart. All of the materials that are sent to teachers in a very rural state so that they can teach this wonderful African novel. They also talked, the Area Studies Centers talked about their work with libraries. So both the library acquisitions on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus, but helping K-12 libraries, again, around the state of Wisconsin to acquire materials to encourage students to expand their horizons and become true global citizens. So the work of the NRCs goes far beyond the language preparation of students on campus, which is very important, but they are educational resources for the states where they're based. I also wanted to ask about your current positions. I know, Naya, you're working at an NRC at present, but is there anything you could share with us about the jobs you hold now and the Title VI or Fulbright Hays or Fulbright programs that are helping you to be better at what you're doing at present?
I could start actually. Since I'm in the private sector. If we look at startup creation, the methodology is basically listen to a customer pain, and then design a product or a solution around that pain that the customer faces. All of this roots, I think, to my background in foreign language studies and in area studies, which is in order to understand a problem, you have to listen. And so the 4 key components of language learning are listening, reading, writing, speaking. I think that's been just a tremendous way of kind of helping to wrap our heads around these very complex issues that countries face and companies face around the world. So it's just about that transfer of skills, and I think it's been invaluable to my own job experience. Yeah.
Yes, so I am the assistant director at NYU, and we do have a Creole program and a Quechua program that are both funded through FLAS, where our students are, through a match with our university, able to have a free graduate program and with a stipend, which is great. And then I also, though, so FLAS for sure and NRC, that all comes up. But I think some other areas that I see the impact of FLAS in my work is I continue to work with Duolingo. I am their point person for Haitian Creole. So even after the courses are finished, they come back to me about any questions they may have. And then my research interests, as I mentioned, are around international affairs and religion. And so I will say one of the findings of learning Creole was how much Africanisms are in the language. We are constantly told that Creole is broken French, and our team is very clear that it is closer to Fon and Igbo than it is to French, and how spiritual the language is, and queer, and many other things in positive ways too. And so I believe my work and my research interest in religiosity and global politics has been impacted by my language learning because it's really shown me the impact of knowing a language, right? Outside of, I need to know this language to do my job. As I was saying with folks who were coming to Haiti and learning the language on the ground, I really see that this has, if we allow the opportunity for someone just to learn the language without ulterior motive or, just in passing, it allows them to understand that culture in that context to then do their work better. And so, yeah, it was very interesting for me to see how Creole was being taught through an English Christian lens, and then to learn that Creole was very much African religiosity and, not even European language based. So yeah, I think that these are the ways that various ways that FLAS has helped me in my daily work.
I don't even know how to begin. I really don't. I don't want to take too much time, but I work at Voice of America. We broadcast in 45 languages. The building, many of you probably know, it's literally right next door. I'll say two things. When I first started, we launched a Bambara service, and there was no one there that was speaking Bambara, and they hired quickly a couple people, but they were like, we want a music program because young people listen to music and that can grab the ear, and then people will then maybe stay tuned and listen to news, which is primarily VOA's mission, is news stuff. And so they asked me to do it, to begin, and so I did. I took my program that was in English and switched it around and did it in Bambara, and it was good. It was great. I did that for, I don't know, 6 months or so, and then we finally hired someone that took that job. So that was like a direct way of using my skill to help the agency achieve its missions, like success. Yes, I love that. And then I'll just say yesterday, so I brought these up because literally, like I said, I came from Dar es Salaam last night, and we had these things we were passing out. This is my show, and then I was there with a colleague who has his own music entertainment show in French. And so I'll tell you what happened just like 2 days ago in Dar. And this is another example of how FLAS and language learning is so, it just spells equal success for me in so many ways. So there was a big Pan-African music conference, collaboration and exchange in Dar. And it's like 8 years running now. Every year, this conference moves locations, and it was in Dar es Salaam. And we went as Voice of America Entertainment and Music to be there, represent and interview people and create buzz and be on local TV and stuff like that and radio. And I was honored to be able to interview or moderate the keynote speaker. And she's this wonderful young South African singer named Sho Madjozi. You really should look her up if you like. It's pop. Anyway, she's just so good. And all the people there just admire her and worship her. And so I was moderating, and we start talking. And then somehow the conversation went to, well, it was all about song, but I asked her if she knew how to, we talked about, and I just sang a little bit of one song, a Bambara song, and everybody was like, wow. And I could feel the audience, everybody, including her, were like, oh, okay, so you really know what you're talking about. You're not just, you didn't just get this job for no reason. And then later, I sang a little excerpt of Malaika. I bet you know that song. And it's in Swahili, which I actually don't speak, but I can sing that song. And you could just, you feel when you have an audience and they like and they're enthralled. And it wasn't my show, it was her. I was moderating, but somehow the whole thing was just magical. And afterwards, so many young people came up to me and were like, oh my gosh, that was just the best talk. It was the best talk. It wasn't just because I did that little performance. It was because the language skills demonstrate to people that you care and you invest. And being someone who represents the US government in that way is really special. And it's really mostly because of the language. And I can sing too, and that does help.
So I now work at another federal agency. I work at the U.S. Department of State. I'm representing my own personal views and opinions. And so I get to work in the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. And so some of the other programs we mentioned, Fulbright Scholar, Fulbright Student, Fulbright Specialist, English Teaching Assistant, Foreign Language Teaching Assistant. There's Music Abroad. There's so many fantastic programs that I get to help promote, help support. And so I feel like my FLAS experience has kind of really dovetailed into, because I've had those language experiences. I know how transformational it is for a student if they're thinking about, I want to do a critical language scholarship. but I don't know that I'm comfortable yet going overseas. And so now we have CLS Spark, where it's a virtual opportunity for them to study a less commonly taught critical language. So, knowing the importance and the value of what we do, it just makes it that much stronger to articulate that to some of our different stakeholders, but also when we're working with foreign governments. Like we've all talked today, the people-to-people experiences that we've had, that we've been able to do with our language learning, that's a hallmark of diplomacy. So whether it's singing a song with someone, whether it's having a meal with someone, whether it's enjoying Secretary Blinken playing the guitar, which he did recently. These are ways that we can kind of have some common bonds and then start to have maybe some of those harder conversations. But if we could start at that people-to-people level, and especially the value of academic programs to go in with that learning mindset, where you're going to make mistakes, you don't know everything, but you're there to learn from one another, you're there to share, it just makes a big difference. And I'm thrilled that I get to do that every day.
So at Georgetown, the research areas that I support are Arab studies, Arab and Middle East studies, Arabic and Islamic studies, Jewish studies, and French and Francophone studies. So the university's drawing on my prior language learning experience also, even though I was hired as the Middle East studies librarian. But as I said, an important part of what I do is curate the Middle East collection. So that means acquiring materials that aren't just written about the Middle East or on the Middle East, but actually come from the region themselves and from thinkers and from scholars from the region. And I see, acquiring often underrepresented materials for the library as an important part of the role that I play at the university. In addition to that, I also support research that's done by faculty and students. So oftentimes that means finding that elusive primary source or that article. And it's been really gratifying to work with sort of the next generation of students, studying these languages, seeing what's available to them now, the different ways that they're engaging with materials that are different than maybe, was the case when I was studying. And then just connecting users with the library, which, I see sort of my role as a liaison librarian, as a subject specialist, as not just, seeing users as students and faculty at Georgetown, but also engaging the community, engaging those who are stakeholders in the national collection, and then engaging international partners as well. So we'll often host groups that come internationally sometimes as well. Yeah.
Can I add? One of the other, I think, beautiful things about FLAS is the ask that you also take an area studies course, and while you're taking these language courses. And so I was in a Creole major or in linguistics. I was international affairs and sociology, and so it worked out very well. But it also ensured, right, that I was learning in context. And I think like a fascinating thing that it just seemed very random, but as we're talking about the Department of State, my area knowledge, right, led me to be a Meridian Fellow with the U.S. Department of State and Republic of South Korea, and it was like, what? Okay, I'm going to South Korea. What does this have to do with my area studies? And of course it did, because South Korea has a presence in Haiti, right? And this is what I was able to like talk about because of my area knowledge and my background. That FLAS was like very put a place of importance on. So I wrote, in my application that it's important for me to go to understand these relations more. And here I am in South Korea, speaking with diplomats and with just all sorts of folks, right? Because I had an understanding of my area, but also knowing the importance of all area studies. So I think that's an important part of FLAS that we don't always talk about, but I always find like really special.
Excellent. A wonderful point on which to conclude this part of the panel discussion. You've heard a lot about the personal and professional benefits of Title VI and the Fulbright Hays programs. And now I want to stop the questions that I've prepared and open things up to the members of the audience. I think we have 10 or 15 minutes for questions from you. So please, anyone who would like to speak, you could use the microphone in the middle of the room.
Hello, good morning, and congratulations for all your success. It's marvelous. And I am a high school teacher. I am actually considering, because it's, you need to write and things, but I would like to know how your learning throughout these scholarships has helped you teach someone, because you have shared how all these experiences have been in your professionals and things, right? But when you are maybe invited to a classroom and I would like for you to put yourself in a high school classroom, okay? How would you invite those students, that teachers, to collaborate on the importance of the learning of the language, the learning of those cultures? How would you take that to that level? Thank you.
Yes, I love this question. As I'm teaching, right, through an app, and am very clear about that. And I would say what worked for me as a student, after many years, I was taking Spanish from first grade, and then high school, I decided to take Spanish and French together. But so language learning has always been a part of my education. But I really feel things clicked when, as you said, collaboration happened between my professor and I, Professor Nicolas Andre. And what that looked like and how it worked for me in my experience was I asked him, can this whole Duolingo project was basically at its core me asking, can I be the teacher? And be the student, right? And he trusted me with that. And so I think that of all my Spanish teachers and French teachers, and this was the moment that clicked, right? It wasn't something about how they were teaching or that we didn't have a good relationship. It was I was now preparing to teach others, and that was so important for me, especially learning a critical language, an indigenous language to my people, because it also it didn't feel you must master this. And as someone, right, who struggled with the academic English since first grade, and whose mother was a teacher and was like, you're going to extra reading class, it was this also healing process because I was now trusted with the language that I was learning. And I think we forget that babies teach each other, right? We teach our babies and then they go to school and you're like, where'd you learn that word, right? Well, they're learning, right, from one another. And so for me, when teaching, I always try to ensure that the student can also teach. And I will say that's what was special to us about Duolingo, is that learners can report that they feel something wasn't right in the course. So while we may never meet face to face, we can have these communications where they can teach us. And Professor Andre's a professor who's like, yes, one of the top linguistics of Haitian Creole, but he's saying right now he's kind of going through it and he's saying, the Miami diaspora has really changed the language. And we have to honor that. So he's like, though we won't teach what they're saying, we're gonna they're going to get it right in Duolingo if they put that in. So right, those dynamics, or what, some may say pedagogy of the oppressed and such things, I think go really far with language learning.
So this is a wonderful question, and it's so valuable to talk to K-12 students. I think like Secretary Cardona has said, and other Department of Education colleagues, other federal colleagues, having these types of language learning experiences and area studies experiences is a 21st century skill. So whatever your students are passionate about, whatever challenge or issue that they think is of concern to them or is interesting to them, there are students their same age in another country that would love to have that kind of conversation with them, to say, oh, I'm really interested in K-pop. How is that changing, how I interact with my friends? Or actually, I think I want to do something with business in the future. I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do something with business. And at some point, you're either going to work with an international supplier, you're going to work with an international customer, or you're going to work with an international team member. We live in a very globally interconnected world. And so the sooner that they can have those language experiences, whether that's through Duolingo, whether that's through school, whether it's through pursuing a federally supported high school exchange program, which there are many, there's so many opportunities for them at this age because they're so open, they're so passionate. We want them to pursue that, and it really has so many different effects. Whatever they want to do with their career, whatever they want to do with their future, if they take the time to reach out, to learn that language, to make those connections, to talk with other people, we would love for them to do that.
It is a wonderful question. Those are excellent comments. I just wanted to add, and then Ryan, you're welcome to jump in. We often talk about the internationalization of the curriculum and the internationalization of teacher professional development. And I hope we are all able to advance that work so that our K-12 teachers are as globally competent as possible. It doesn't mean that they need to know 55 languages, but whatever the topic is that they're teaching, could they think about it from these multiple global perspectives? I think, Heather, your work with Voice of America is just ideal for high school students, to connect through music, make friendships that way. I've spoken to groups from, third graders to 13th graders. And very often, if we just start with what they're interested in and expand outward, we find ways to bring an international perspective to the classroom. Ryan.
I was just going to say that, related to many of the things that my co-panelists have said, there are two major ways I think that language learning has made me a better educator. One of them is that language learning is a massive exercise in empathy, and it has really allowed me to sort of understand what it means to start from zero with a language, like many students do, or to go through the challenges that many language learners face. And I think I bring that sort of empathy with me into the classroom or into research consultations or various interactions I have with students. And I think the second I was going to say, which Dean Favris already talked about, was the value of sort of opening up the classroom, of bringing in, a book as an object, or a song, or a film. These are the things that sort of lit up my eyes when I was a language learner, and I think they do the same for many, many students.
Thank you. I think we have time perhaps for one or two more questions. Sure.
You go first, please answer.
Sorry, I was closer, I guess. Well, I wanted to thank the panel so much for these really interesting stories, like fascinating career paths. I am at the Defense Language and National Security Education Office. Our office funds the Project Go that you mentioned, the language flagship, the Boren Awards, and we always like to emphasize to students for the academic programs that they're encouraged. We encourage applications from students of all majors, or students who are studying a language and something else. But I think there's often a bit of a roadblock or a perception that language, students may be coming in from high school, think language is fun or interesting, but they don't see it as practical. They don't see, and maybe sometimes their parents who are advising, their academic decisions don't see a career path other than maybe being a translator. And I wonder how we can kind of message that studying languages, studying the kind of critical languages and lesser taught languages can really pay off, if students are looking at a career, it can lead them to a way to pursue their passions and have an interesting career. And I mean, I look at the panel, and it's such a broad variety of careers and interests. And how can we kind of help students, as as they're picking their academic careers, understand that language can be a component in that?
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful question. I'm wondering if, in the interest of time, if we should take all three questions, and then each panelist could choose one to respond to. I saw, yes, your hand, and then one other.
Okay. Actually, my question piggybacks off of yours. I just wanted to know if there's a place for STEM students, engineering, computer science. I know, Naya, you literally built an app, and I know some of you are in higher education. So have you thought of targeting students in that area?
Thank you. And why don't we take this final question, sir?
First of all, I want to say thank you guys for your enlightening insight into the language learning process. English is not my first language, and as someone who speaks 5 languages, I've mostly studied by myself using grammar books, the media, and I had to just enroll in advanced courses just so I can have, my transcript to prove that, yes, I do know that language. But however, my main issue when it comes to wanting to teach the languages that I know, there seems to be a lot of difficulty in the sense that I'm not sure if people are not taking me seriously or anything like. I'm sorry, I'm mildly autistic. When I try to, because I was a top student in all my language courses, just the one that I enroll in, just so I can have proof, and yet it just seems a bit difficult, in what besides teaching, I guess, in what way do you think I can contribute my knowledge of language translate it into a career, so to speak? And just to add more, I majored in political science, and my focus was Russia and Ukraine, Eastern Europe. So,
Excellent. Thank you. Three great questions. So why don't we each take one of those? Yes, Heather, you want to start?
Sure. Sorry, I just popped up in my head. One thing you could do, voiceovers is a very popular job. It can be a side gig. It can be a full-time career where you do voiceovers. All you need is a little podcaster, a microphone, a quiet space, and you can work like that where they say a film or a commercial or God knows anything needs a translation in a different language, a voiceover. You can do that.
and yeah, that's a really good suggestion. And I don't mean to take anybody else's time, but also like my major was in political science. So when you were talking about Voice of America, I was really like fascinated by that, about the message to the world. And I think there's a lot of discrepancy, especially in the age of disinformation, that some of the messages from Voice of America does not get across. And there are people out there who are fed propaganda from their local, from the local environment, from the local governments, and which presents kind of a difficulty just reaching to, So I imagine, Okay, so I just want to say thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. And I don't know whether anyone would like just very briefly to respond to the first 2 questions, which are quite similar, about how to reach those in STEM engineering fields and how to message the importance of critical and less commonly taught languages.
I guess I could tackle that. In my previous role at American Councils for International Education, I built out an internship program for Uzbek youth. And the core curriculum with that program was skill building and identifying the skills. And if you look at the National Association for Collegiate Employers, NACE, they did a survey of employers of what are the top skills that are missing, where are the skills gap. And it's problem solving, it's communications, it's all of the skills that foreign languages can really bring forward. But when asked employers, is foreign language skills important, it's ranked on the bottom. So I think it's about extracting all of the skills that one can gain from studying a foreign language and really kind of thinking about it in a broader skill set.
So one of the great experiences I got to have was I worked on the Indiana Language Roadmap, which was supported by the Department of Defense. And so through that initiative and also other efforts, we did a lot of messaging both with students and their parents, but also with working with businesses, working with employers to say, like Adrian was talking about, there's all of these surveys about, the skills that languages have or how increasingly diverse and multilingual communities are throughout the United States. So how can we kind of better reach those audiences that can kind of push those levers to say, okay, maybe we need to modify our curricular tracks a little bit so we actually have space for someone to take those language credits. Sometimes undergraduate advisors, you can kind of help working with faculty to advocate for those efforts. But I think a lot of my experiences, working with businesses, working with community stakeholders to help them see that value, but also to say, what would convince you? I'm passionate about languages. I know how to talk to teachers. I know how to talk to students. What would convince you that you want to hear about this, that you want to hire people like this? And I think that's, a space where all of us can play a role in kind of pushing those conversations forward.
Maybe one or two last words. Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I think that, so I'm big on interdisciplinary study. I went to 2 different schools for my master's to try to create, what I needed. And I say that to say that, when we're talking about STEM, and I think I do see how these 2 questions are connected, because we're also talking about where careers seem to where we feel there's money and stability, and usually it's this push towards STEM and business, and I don't see how language is not important in whatever field you're studying, and specifically foreign language, language that isn't your own. And I find it fascinating, that we're here talking like how critical this is, while my Korean counterparts all spoke English, and we all know this narrative, of the world knowing our language, and we just showing up, and I think that's what we have to work on, and it makes me sad, that we're still working on this, but I think that's the framing is like, how would you say your major in another language? Do you know how to say library science, Do you know how to say museum studies? Or how are you going to communicate, with your colleagues? Or what would happen if you're able to read about this research in another language, and how will that expand your knowledge? And so I do think that students can pursue their passions, whatever they are, but we must demand that they do foreign language education, because we're ever increasing in globalization, and also U.S. students want to travel, they want to go abroad and have jobs abroad. And then, as I was saying, they just show up and they have to learn the language on the ground. And that's not always the best way to do that. It's a beautiful way in some things, but it's not always the best way, especially when we show up with our U.S. passport, as we say in Haiti,
Thank you. The questions from the audience and the insights and experiences that you have shared with us today show how very important it is for us to continue to be champions for multilingual education and programs like Title VI and Fulbright Hays. So I want to thank the panelists very much for being here this morning, and thank all of you as well. We will have some time for further communication and networking. And Sarah, did you want to say anything else?
A heartfelt thank you for your uplifting keynote address and for moderating this very. Oh, okay. And thank you. A heartfelt thank you for your keynote address, which was very uplifting, and for moderating this very impressive panel. Your passion for languages and promoting international education is inspirational. Unfortunately, Deputy Assistant Secretary Garbe had to leave early because she is planning an event for Secretary Cardona tomorrow for International Education Week, but it was critical that she heard your keynote address. So thank you again. I'd also like to thank our panelists for sharing your rich and international education experiences and your journeys with Title VI and Fulbright Hays. They're very impressive. Thank you. I also want to take this time to thank the entire Eiffel team, but particularly Gabby Gillespie and Amy Marion, whose tireless efforts ensured that this event was a success. Behind the scenes, their attention to detail, logistics, and their marketing efforts are commendable. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce all of the Eiffel team, our Senior Director, Cheryl Gibbs, our Director, Gary Thomas of the International Studies team, in the back, Timothy Duval, Brian Swick, Program Officers with Title VI, Garrett Cheeky, our education research analyst. Carolyn, that's Jessica, she's our useful Title VI program officer. Colin Roach, who joined our Eiffel team a few months ago. Thank you for your help. Matthew Robinson is also back there. Where's Carolyn? I don't see. Where? Okay, I don't see you. Carolyn Collins is back there as well. So we're going to break for a few minutes, and then we do have time until noon for our networking, and we have some tables set up on the side. There is a cafeteria kind of down here where you could grab a cup of coffee if you so choose. And Cheryl, yes?
We've heard so much about each of their languages. Perhaps they can each say the sentence, international education changed my life in their language. So obviously here, the beauty of language. So starting from my right.
Okay. So التعليم الدولي غير حياتي.
Autonosin bofrol hamgin sandan.
L'éducation internationale m'a changé la vie.
Éducation internationale changé vive moi.
Международное образование изменил мое життя.
Elimuni ufungo wa maisha. I'm changing it slightly because that's an idiom in Swahili that's very important. Education is the key to life.